Hi guys, how you doing? Quasi Solomon here for my presentation for 512, Dr. Gervais Salou. So I'm just going to jump right into it and start. There's a lot of things I learned in the class. There's a few things I learned when I did my site visit from fellow teachers that I knew from before. They informed me about some things that, I'm sure it's in the book, but I didn't get to it, or I missed it when we were reading it. But some of the things that jumped out at me are the correlation between ESL and special education students. That's just a personal aspect for me because I have a special education background. So when we read things that were talking about scaffolding and analyzing students and their mentality and trying to connect with them in different ways, those are the things that jumped out at me. Not because they were new necessarily, but because they were very similar to things that I had studied before, I learned about before. Culturally conscious, being culturally conscious with students. That also jumped out at me because it's so important when structuring a lesson plan or when teaching students from somewhere else that we know something about their background. We know something that they're bringing to our class. I had heard about the funds of knowledge before, and how to incorporate all of that into the classroom. But it was definitely a positive step forward as far as, seeing that, look, these are things that definitely have to be brought in. But when we're talking about ESL kids or ELL kids, it's so much more because now there is a language barrier. Multiple levels of intelligences. It kind of goes without saying. Knew about it before, but just the emphasis of it. How important it is that we incorporate it into what we're doing also jumped out at me. The WIDA standards. I'll tell you now, I definitely didn't know anything about the WIDA standards. It wasn't something that was, that I learned about before. But just the fact of incorporating, writing, listening, speaking, and reading into everything that we try to do in the classroom, trying to get it all in within one class. And the importance of it, I think, is what stood out to me. In any classroom, we definitely incorporate those things. But just the importance of getting new language learners to do them. It reminds me of something my Japanese teacher said to me once. She told me I was doing well with the class, but I made some comment about, well, yeah, so what if I don't know exactly all the alphabet? And she told me, well, you don't want to be illiterate. And I said, I'm not illiterate. She said, well, you don't want to be illiterate in Japanese. So that was sort of something that, stuck with me. And that's one of the things that, as far as incorporating reading, writing, speaking, and everything, the student might be able to speak English, but they need to also be able to write English, right? For us to get that. Of course, having the students respond with, who, what, where, why, the 5 W's, the importance of who, what, where, why. Just having them formulate and start to think about those ideas and how they're intricate to what they're doing is also very important. So I'm going to go over my plan briefly for you guys. I began my lesson plan. I went with the Madeline Hunter lesson plan. So I have, the students will feel successful. It's just an overarching topic. The student will feel successful in a new classroom environment and while learning English. The student will process important vocabulary in the classroom through the viewing of PowerPoints, graphic novels, age-appropriate books, flashcards, listening, repeating. They will also practice, of course, the WIDA standards of listening, speaking, writing, and reading. And, just all those things, right? One of the key things that stood out to me was when I went on my visit, I said hi to a kid, and the teacher corrected the student. The student then responded hi. I was like, hey, informally. And the student kind of responded, hey, or hi, or whatever. And the teacher said, no, hello, right? So that's one of those key things that I think we probably don't think about when we think about teaching students. Or I know I didn't. I'm going to speak for myself. I know I did not. However, when I went on my visit, it showed the importance of how an ESL teacher looks at it. I don't want to teach you slang. I don't want to teach you something that is not going to be important for you to carry on with later on. So that was one of the things that I had that stood out, and I had it up there, just teaching proper vocabulary in the classroom. The do now for me was I try to incorporate a little bit of fun. I come from a structure where we sit down in the morning, we have group. So it's like sort of a group atmosphere. It's called group guided interaction. We sit down and we discuss things. I think this translates extremely well to our ELL students. You know, we can have them sit, we can have them go through practices. One of the things we do is, you know, a clapping game where we start out. I might go, for example, you know, Mr. Solomon, and then, you know, the other person will pick up the beat and the rhythm, and we'd all still keep clapping, you know, while the other person is speaking. I thought that was something excellent that we could stick in there for the students. You know, just sort of something for an introduction. 5 minutes, let's introduce ourselves. Let me go over and talk to you guys about what I'm going to do. Let me remind our students of, you know, our alphabet. Let me remind our students of the days of the week. You know, all the things that are introductory and we must do. The WIDA standard for me was 1.3.2. Point B, ask and answer questions such as who, what, where, why, when, and how, and demonstrate an understanding of key details in the text. Also followed by standard 2, which is English language learners should communicate information, ideas, and concepts. I thought this was I think I can accomplish that within my lesson plan as I have it structured, because there's a lot of areas in it for the students to discuss and bring things to the table, and for us to read and then respond in their own way using sentence structure, prefabricated cards that they can respond with. It's something that I saw also on my visit, and a light bulb sort of went off. You know, hey, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, why not follow up on a few of these things? My lesson plan is designed as well for push-in and pull-out models, because that's also something that I was, you know, quote-unquote schooled on by the teachers that I saw and I interacted with, was that, you know, the qualification of what it is. You know, once a student reaches 2.4 on the WIDA scale, there's no more pull-out for that student. You know, so at that point, you then have to go into the classroom and teach that student. So now I look at that as, you know, interacting with the other students, the other teacher, lesson plan, while trying to still get the student to learn and practice some of the things that we've done before. I have, you know, matching games, so they do matching games. When they're pulled out with me, they'll do matching games. We'll go through classroom materials, practice, you know, just discussing things within the classroom, you know, asking for a pencil, asking for a pen, asking to get water, you know, the things that, you know, beginning learners in English would want to start with, or we would want them to start with. My anticipatory step for the student is just giving them a picture of, hey, you know, you guys are going to get to read, you're going to get to figure out, you're going to get to make a step and, you know, formulate this world, and, you know, we're going to look into it. And really, that's just my anticipatory step for getting them to be excited about reading comic books, you know, reading materials. And those are the things that I'm looking at. Instructional input, graphic organizers, you know, I'm big on those because you get a chance to hit information two ways. A graphic organizer, as we studied already, you know, basically you get a pictorial representation of an abstract concept. So that's an excellent thing for new learners, because now they can see what we're speaking to them about. And then they can also put those things into categories, which helps them to make connections, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect words to pictures, words to dialogue, so that the students are making those connections and they're making them easily. Check for understanding. I'd have prefabricated sheets. You know, a closed diagram would be one. A closed activity, excuse me, where the students are able to fill in the words, trying to, you know, see if they've, you know, learned any new vocabulary from the things they were reading. Also, it basically will get them to, focus in on grammar and vocabulary, discussing things in the classroom and all of that. I'll speed it up. Guided practice. I'm looking at think, pair, and share. Students aren't going to learn from me, all right? Students are going to learn from each other. They're going to learn by interacting with each other.